Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're going to be taking a closer look at something I know a lot of you are really interested in. Light therapy for myopia. We've got a stack of research here, including a brand new systematic review. And we're going to be extracting the most important bits just for you. So think of this as like your shortcut to understanding what this research really tells us about different light therapies, how well they work, how safe they are, and how practical they are to actually use. And trust me, there's some surprising findings along the way, especially when it comes to red light therapy and what it could mean for eye health.
That's right. Myopia is a really big and growing concern worldwide. And this systematic review dives into a bunch of promising light-based therapies. My role here is to help us understand not just like what the studies say, but what it all means for you.
Okay, so let's set the stage here. It feels like everyone's wearing glasses these days. Is myopia really on the rise, or am I just imagining it?
You're definitely not imagining it. Myopia is a global problem. It's impacting billions of people, and it's projected to get even worse in the coming years. And it's not just about needing glasses, it's the risk of high myopia. That's really concerning. This can lead to serious complications like retinal detachment and glaucoma, which can threaten your vision.
So it's not just an inconvenience, it's a real health concern. And I know wearing glasses or contacts helps you see,
Yeah.
but they don't actually slow down the progression of myopia, right?
Exactly. That's because myopia isn't just about genetics. Environmental factors play a huge role. And essentially what happens is the eye grows too long. So instead of light focusing directly on the retina, at the back of the eye, it focuses in front of it, causing blurry distance vision.
Got it. So longer eyeballs.
No.
Equal blurry landscapes. And this is where light therapy comes into the picture, right? Like
Yeah.
we're trying to mimic the benefits of spending time outdoors.
Precisely. We know that kids who spend more time outdoors have lower rates of myopia. One theory is that outdoor light is simply different. It's much brighter and contains a broader spectrum of light, including UV and infrared, which we're often lacking indoors.
Interesting. So it's not just about the amount of light, but the type of light as well.
Yes, and that's what's led researchers to explore various types of light therapy: red light, violet or UV light, and even just optimizing the lighting in classrooms.
Sounds like a bright idea, no pun intended. So tell me about this systematic review. How many studies did they look at, and what exactly were they investigating?
This particular review focused on 19 studies, examining the effectiveness, safety, and implementation of these different light therapies for myopia, prevention and control. They looked at randomized controlled trials, which are considered the gold standard, as well as some non-randomized studies.
Okay, good to know. So let's start with red light therapy, which seems to be getting a lot of buzz these days. What did the review find?
Well, across 13 studies, red light therapy consistently showed a significant reduction in what's called axial elongation. That's the lengthening of the eyeball that we talked about earlier, in some cases. The studies even showed axial shortening, meaning the eye actually got slightly shorter.
Wait, so red light might not just slow down myopia,
Yeah.
but potentially even reverse it a bit? That's pretty mind-blowing.
It is promising, but we need to be cautious. The studies used various follow-up durations, ranging from 4 weeks to 24 months, so we need to understand the long-term effects.
Right, long-term data is key. What about the rebound effect you mentioned earlier? Did the review address that?
Yes, it did. A few studies found that when red light therapy was stopped, the rate of myopia progression increased again. It didn't erase all the benefits, but it does suggest that it's not necessarily a one-time fix.
Interesting. So it's more like hitting the pause button.
Yeah.
On myopia progression, maybe?
That's a good analogy. And this is where it gets even more fascinating. The review highlighted that red light therapy's effectiveness seemed to vary depending on the child's initial axial length.
So are you saying that children with more severe myopia, meaning longer eyeballs, might actually benefit more from red light therapy?
That's what some of the research suggests. Yes. And there are also hints of a dose-response effect, meaning that using a higher power red light might lead to better myopia control.
Okay, I'm getting the sense there's a lot more to red light therapy than meets the eye. What did the review say about safety? Shining red light into your eyes sounds a little, well, science fiction-y.
I understand the concern, but most of the studies reported no adverse effects from red light therapy.
That's reassuring. But were there any exceptions?
A couple studies did mention some transient issues, like dry eyes, or experiencing after images after treatment. However, these seem to be temporary and not serious.
Okay, that makes sense. Nothing is ever completely risk-free. But even if the therapy is safe and effective, how easy is it to actually use red light therapy in real life? I imagine it's not just a matter of holding a red light bulb up to your eye.
You're right. Implementation is a crucial factor. The systematic review did highlight the challenge of getting people to stick with the treatment, which is known as compliance. Compliance rates varied considerably across the studies.
So some kids were probably more diligent
Yeah,
about using the therapy than others.
exactly. And here's the interesting part. The studies that looked at the relationship between compliance and effectiveness found a positive correlation. The more consistently the children used the red light therapy, as instructed, the better their results tended to be.
Okay, so consistency is key. It's not just about the therapy itself, but also about making it a regular part of your routine. What about the other therapies included in this review? What did they find about violet light therapy?
All right, let's delve into that next. So violet light therapy, also known as UV light therapy, presented some intriguing findings, but the results were a bit more mixed compared to red light therapy. Overall, there wasn't a statistically significant effect on axial length, or something called spherical equivalent refraction, or SER-DO.
Okay, I'm going to admit, I'm not entirely sure what spherical equivalent refraction means. Could you break that down for me and for our listeners, who might be wondering the same thing?
Absolutely. Think of it as a single number. That summarizes the degree of nearsightedness or farsightedness. It combines two components of your eye's prescription, the sphere and the cylinder.
So a higher SER means worse vision.
Generally, yes. A higher, more positive number usually indicates more farsightedness, while a lower, more negative number indicates more nearsightedness.
Got it. So back to violet light therapy. You said the overall results weren't as clear-cut as red light therapy, but I'm guessing there's more to the story.
You're right, there's always more nuance. When the researchers looked at specific subgroups within the studies, some interesting patterns emerged. For example, violet light therapy showed some promise in younger children.
Interesting. So maybe catching myopia early is key, like hitting it with violet light before it has a chance to really take hold.
That's a good hypothesis. And there's another group that responded well, kids who hadn't started wearing eyeglasses yet, and who also had limited near work time, like reading or using screens.
So maybe violet light is more effective as a preventative measure for those who are at risk of developing myopia.
That's a good way to think about it. But it's important to remember that we need more research to confirm these findings. We need to pinpoint the optimal way to use violet light therapy, including the right age group and the ideal duration and intensity of treatment.
Makes sense. So what about the idea of just cranking up the lights in classrooms? It seems logical. More light, better for the eyes.
Right. It's a fascinating area of research, and it's rooted in the idea of mimicking the benefits of outdoor light indoors. One study included in this review did show some promising results. They found that increased classroom lighting led to a reduced incidence of myopia and slower progression in children who weren't myopic at the start of the study.
That's encouraging. So brighter classrooms could potentially be a real game changer in preventing myopia in the first place. Talk about a bright idea.
Indeed, however, for children who were already myopic, the results were less clear. Again, more research is needed to fully understand the impact of increased classroom lighting on children who already have myopia.
Right, so promising, but not a definitive solution yet. And of course, we can't forget about the original light therapy. Spending time outdoors, that's got to be the easiest and most accessible option. Right?
Absolutely. It's often referred to as green time, and it's a cornerstone of myopia prevention. All three studies in the review that looked at increased outdoor time showed significant reductions in both the incidence and progression of myopia.
That's great news. It reinforces what we already know. Getting kids outside is good for them in so many ways, including their eye health.
Right. And let's not forget, it's free. No fancy equipment or appointments needed.
Exactly. Although there's always a bit, isn't there?
You know me too well. While the benefits of increased outdoor time are well established, there's still some debate about whether it's equally effective for children who are already myopic.
Okay, so more research needed there too. Sensing a theme here. But here's something that I've been thinking about. We talked a lot about the effectiveness of these different light therapies, but what about the practical side of things?
You're hitting on a crucial point. This systematic review really highlighted the importance of implementation. It's one thing for a therapy to work in a research setting, but it's another thing entirely for people to be able to use it consistently and correctly in their daily lives.
Right. Like who wants to wear bulky goggles or sit under a red light for hours every day if it's a hassle?
Exactly. A treatment can have all the scientific backing in the world, but if it's too difficult or inconvenient to use, it's not going to make a real difference in people's lives.
So how do we bridge that gap between research and real-world application? Did the review offer any insights into how to improve implementation?
It did touch upon some strategies that were used in the studies, particularly in the red light therapy trials. Some involved training parents to supervise the therapy and make sure their children were using the devices correctly.
That makes sense. Kids need guidance, and sometimes a gentle nudge to stick with any kind of treatment plan.
Absolutely. Other studies used reminders to help participants stay on track, such as text messages or phone calls.
It's like having a personal myopia coach.
Yeah.
Were there any other innovative approaches mentioned in the review?
One study even used a device that connected to the internet and tracked usage, which I thought was pretty cool.
Wow, that's taking myopia management to a whole new level. High-tech and hopefully highly effective.
The hope is that by making the therapy more engaging and by providing feedback on usage, compliance will improve.
That makes sense. But even with all these efforts, I imagine some participants still dropped out of the studies, right? Real life has a way of interfering with even the best laid plans.
Unfortunately, you're right. The review did mention the issue of loss to follow-up, which means participants stopped participating in the study for various reasons.
So what were some of the reasons people dropped out?
They varied. Sometimes it was simply inconvenience or changes in their schedules. In other cases, participants opted for different myopia management options, such as orthokeratology, also known as ortho-K, which involves wearing special contact lenses at night to reshape the cornea.
Right. So there are other options out there, but this dropout rate does raise some important questions about long-term commitment to light therapy, doesn't it?
It does. If people aren't able to stick with the therapy over time, its effectiveness is going to be limited, no matter how promising the initial results may be.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. Where does this leave us? What are the key takeaways? Someone listening who's thinking, okay, this light therapy stuff sounds intriguing, but where do I go from here?
Well, I think the evidence supporting red light therapy and increased outdoor time for myopia management is becoming pretty compelling. They seem to be like the front runners right now, with solid research backing up their effectiveness in slowing down the progression of myopia.
That's reassuring to hear, but I'm sure there's still some caveats, especially when it comes to the newer therapies.
Absolutely. We still need more research on violet light therapy and increased classroom lighting to be certain about their effectiveness and how they compare to the other options.
Right. There were still some unanswered questions
Right.
about the best ways to use those therapies and who might benefit most. What about the safety aspect? We touched upon it briefly, but are there any lingering concerns?
That's a critical point. While most studies reported no serious side effects, the long-term safety data, especially for newer therapies like red light and violet light, is still somewhat limited. More research is needed to ensure these therapies are safe for growing eyes over extended periods.
Makes sense. We need to be sure these therapies are both effective and safe for the long haul. And we can't forget about the practical side of things. Even the most promising therapy won't work if people can't easily incorporate it into their life.
Exactly. Figuring out how to make these therapies easy to use and fit seamlessly into people's daily routines is absolutely crucial. It's not just about what works in a lab setting, but what works for you in the real world.
So it's a combination of scientific evidence, safety data, and practical considerations. It sounds like there's a lot to weigh. When considering light therapy for myopia, what advice would you give to our listener who's trying to navigate all of this information?
This deep dive has hopefully equipped you with some key insights, but it's just the beginning. The most important step is to have an open and honest conversation with an eye care professional. Discuss your specific concerns, any risk factors you might have, and your lifestyle.
Don't just take our word for it. Talk to an expert who can personalize the advice based on your individual needs and circumstances.
Exactly. Armed with the knowledge from this deep dive, you can ask informed questions and make decisions that are right for you or your child.
This has been a truly illuminating discussion. Thanks for shedding light on this important topic. And for our listeners, remember, knowledge is power. Do your research, talk to your eye care professional, and make informed decisions about your eye health.
Well said. And don't be afraid to keep shining a light on this evolving field, as new research is constantly emerging.